The following announcement has been paid for by Discover the Flow.
What up? We came in and spray painted the titles. We went heel, we no longer your idols. Hollywood, Hulk Hogan, and outsiders.
I spent about $600 for it. I've had it for about a year, and I finally figured out how to make it work about 3 weeks ago.
There you go.
It's taking me that long. Right. I'm a high-tech redneck.
We were using some lavalier
me both, sir.
microphones to do an interview this past weekend, and the computer told us they were hooked up, and then no, they weren't. So that's great audio.
Story of my life.
Okay.
So I don't normally do this because we like to keep it more casual, and I don't do intros, but I had to for this one. The only other person we've done one for is Don Bentley, who was he was an Army Air Force helicopter pilot. He was FBI agent. He does all this cool stuff, and he took over the what was it? The Tom Clancy
Jr.
books.
novels. He did Tom
He
Clancy
took over
Jr.
the Tom
novels
Clancy
and a couple
novels.
other things.
What do you mean he took him over?
He took him over after Tom Clancy passed away.
No, that's
so he bought the
more
rights
or
to
less. No, he was
they chose
hired
him
by the
as
publishing
like
company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well, that's a hell of a
publishing company
story.
took him over.
What an interesting cat. I'm in good company. I appreciate that.
Well, we go target model to salesman to on-screen interviewer, president of WCW, the voice of the NWO, one of the greatest promoters in the history of pro wrestling, chief media officer of Real American Wrestling. And if you watch DDP's videos recently, a jacked 70-year-old zaddy with a good pump. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Bischoff.
And that's a personal hero of mine, by the way.
That's the most fun intro I've ever had. I loved it. Like there was no music, there was no pyro, there was no dancing girls, there was no confetti. But man, it was cool.
Could have used some Nitro Girls. I'll tell you that. That's the one thing.
Always use some Nitro. Who can't use some Nitro Girls? Come on.
You know, I've actually asked recently if that kind of thing would be over and would work nowadays.
Of course it would.
You know what I mean?
Look, I stole the idea from the NFL and the NBA. It's not like it was an original idea. You know, it's like every sport has stuff that's fun to watch when the game's not in action, when the game's not in gear, you know, sideline stuff, you know, penalty calls in football, whatever the case may be. Everybody likes the energy of a great dance team.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
No matter what anyone,
appealing.
No matter what anyone says, wrestling's target demographic will always be 18 to 36-year-old males. 100% will always be that. So 18 to 36-year-old typical males tend to like watching women dance around half naked. I do.
It is what it is.
I'm not 18 to 36 anymore, but I mean, I'll watch it.
Hey, I'm 70. My life hasn't changed all that much.
You don't look it
pretty damn good for 70. So,
well, I feel good for 70, but I work at it pretty hard.
I gotta say, go ahead. I gotta say thank you though, because I know it was a little awkward the way we got this set up. When I called a couple months ago, I was going to leave a voicemail, and then you called on the other end, so I hung up and answered and was actually talking to you. I thought at best I would get like an assistant or something like that, but I appreciate you not being all like, "Hey, what the hell, man? How do you get my number?"
No, you know, I don't like it when my number, you know, when people that I don't know have my number because it can get to be a problem. Some people have way too much fun with it, then they give it to their friends, and it's really unfortunate. Yeah. But at the same time, I don't want to go through the hassle of having a kayfabe phone number and having an assistant, and the assistant's got to find me, and if I have a question, they got to ask the assistant, then they got to call you back. It's like, you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't. So I'd rather just deal direct. It's a lot easier in the long run.
Well, I hope we weren't too annoying trying to.
No. If you were, I wouldn't be here. No, I appreciate persistence.
I do want to take a moment to thank you. I mean, this is our 1 year anniversary. We've been doing this for
That's right. Congratulations, guys.
a year. This is actually going to release on Saturday, which is our exact 1 year anniversary since our first release podcast. So
That's
I
awesome.
would really like to thank you for being willing to do this with us.
Oh no, I'm excited for you guys. And look, I dig it. And that's another thing, why I like doing stuff like this with people who might not otherwise, feel like they can figure out how to reach me or whatever. Because I really dig, what you guys are doing, young guys who have a passion for something. And now we all have access to this incredible technology in these platforms to go out and kind of share our view of the world with each other. And sometimes it works really, really great. Sometimes maybe not so much, but it's always fun. And I think it's really cool what you're doing. So I enjoy being a part of shows like this, especially guys who are grinding it out and have made it to 1 year, because that's hard to do. Most people give up a lot, don't even make it to 1 year. So congratulations.
Yeah, we were told that the statistics are there's about 4 million podcasts out there, and about 90% of them don't make it to their 10th episode, and what's left normally don't make it to their 20th. We have a good problem where we're backlogged, where we have enough episodes to get us to like April of next year.
Yeah, so. And you know what? As long as you guys keep having fun, and that's I have to remind myself of this often. I've been doing our podcast now for 7 years. There's like 360 episodes out there. They're about 2.5 hours a pop. So it's like 1,000 hours of me battling out there, right? But the reason I still do it is because I have fun doing it. I look forward to doing it. And I really believe, especially in podcasting, that as long as you guys figure out a way for you to have fun, the audience will come along for the ride. But the minute you quit finding ways to have fun with it, then you got a challenge on your hands, because the people listening won't have fun either. So just keep it fun.
We're both forever students, so we both like to be learning all the time. So being able to talk to people and learning their stories and what gets them to where they're at and how they got there and what keeps them going, that's fascinating to us. So as long as we're learning, I think we're going to keep going until we can't learn anymore.
Yeah, that's a really great quality to have, right? It keeps you intellectually curious, and you stay kind of adventurous in a way. As you're learning about new things, you're willing to try, some of those new things, whether it's, podcasting or whatever it is in life. The more you're learning, the more you're willing to try. So that's cool.
Well, I'm excited because we've got you here. Like I said, we've been in the wrestling business for years, but we're not a wrestling podcast. We didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves into just like one little corner of the world. But now I get to ask cool shit like this, and I'm going to kick it off fast. I was listening to some interviews recently, and I remember back in the day, because I restarted watching Nitro from the very beginning, and I'm trying to stick with it and go all the way to the end. It's getting a little difficult in the Russo era, but there is still good stuff on there. There is still some guys you could see really trying to work their asses off. First of all,
the wheels were starting to wobble late in '98. I mean, we're still doing pretty well. We're still competitive. The ratings were still good. We're still making money hand over fist. But creatively, if you watch it closely, you'll see that the attention to detail wasn't there. The emphasis on cliffhangers in the way we laid stories out wasn't there. Obviously, we overused in Road to Death certain formulas that were no longer working, but you get the early glimpses of that starting in about, I would say, October, probably November of '98 is when the wheels start to wobble.
Yeah, at this point, I think he's in you're in year 2000. You're in 2000 right now, somewhere in the middle of 2000.
I'm in 2000.
So the wheels,
a couple of those wheels have already fallen off.
Yeah.
And I've loved wrestling for a long
4th.
time. So for that to be a thing and to watch, actually sit down and binge watch the wheels falling off, it's kind of fascinating, because you didn't really notice it at the time, but watching it all in retrospect and knowing what comes next, it's really, really fascinating.
Changes your perspective.
October 4th, 1999, I was watching that episode, and I noticed that WCW excitedly announced that Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara were coming over from the WWE, and you know, knowing what I know now, I had to laugh a little bit because I was like, wow, they sounded so excited about the potential at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that was Turner Broadcasting, and unfortunately, you know, this is not just this situation. What I'm referring to isn't unique to Turner Broadcasting, but you know, professional wrestling as a property, as a television property, is completely different than any other form of television properties. Meaning, TNT, who does a lot of movies, for example, well, they do produce some of their own originals. I don't know how much they do now, but they used to produce pretty consistently their own originals because Ted believed in owning your content and owning the distribution as well. But there were also a lot of movies that they licensed, right? So the TNT library, for example, was mostly licensed movie footage, some drama, series, and scripted, and all that. I forgot where I was going with this. I'll come back to it. Sorry, I went off into the weeds and forgot where I was going.
That's all right. It happens to us all the time. I got a lot of different stuff I'll jump around to, though. But like some of the stuff that I was noticing, and this was a big thing for me. When I was younger, my stepdad used to say, you know, can we not watch WWF? Like, let's watch NWA. Let's watch WCW. It's more real. You know, and as a young kid, I don't understand that. But as an adult, you rewatch all that stuff and you start to realize, yeah, you guys did have more of a realistic feel, less corny characters. And
I mean, there were some, you know, we certainly had our Dungeon of Doom and, you know.
Oh, yeah, and your Disco Infernos and stuff like that.
Some weird version of Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake, you know. We all.
Which one? There were about 7.
But.
My favorite being the Booty Man with the high knee as his finisher.
Yeah, Booty Man was awesome, no doubt about it. But
then he got Jack and became the Disciple.
The thing with wrestling is producing it for television is you've got to satisfy the entire audience, but you have to do it in buckets. Meaning, you know, kids like certain highly animated, cartoonish type of characters and the storylines that go with them. Teens and preteens, they're at that age where they're kind of wishing they were their older brother or their older brother's friends, right? They're aspiring to be older and bigger than they are. So they look at wrestling a certain way. And then when you get into your late teens, you look at it differently. You get in your 20s, you look at it even more differently. But you have to kind of, as a producer, you have to produce a little bit of everything for everybody, hoping that the whole boat floats.
Yeah. Another thing that I noticed from that era was, and I don't know if you guys noticed this or not, or what, for some reason, and it didn't matter how long he was gone for, every time you guys brought out Jim Duggan, he got a pop like he was Steve Austin.
Isn't that
did
funny?
You guys ever pick up on that?
Well, of course. That's why I hired him. Because you know you're going to get a good...
He could be gone for 6 months, and then you bring him out for just a random match, and it was like
Duggan was the original Real American. I mean, that's
a perfect thing. That's a perfect example of what I was saying. Duggan had his own segment of the audience. They were conditioned to react to Jim Duggan because he'd been doing it for so long, and it was so much fun. Nobody had any big expectations of a Jim Duggan match, right? Nobody had high expectations of an amazing, you know, technical match that would really impress people. No, you knew this guy was going to come out, make a funny face, go thumbs up with a 2x4, and just go out there and put on a 6-minute show. But everybody was engaged in it. So that segment of the audience had their fix, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point because it was quick, it was entertaining. You knew what you were going to get,
and you knew the crowd was going to pop.
Fun. Yeah, it was wild the way they popped for him.
So, out of curiosity, whose idea was it to bring the Lucha guys in and make an entire division out of Lucha at that time? Lucha wasn't really super popular in the American crowd at that time until WCW really started bringing a lot of Lucha guys in.
That was me. And it all started in Japan when I was watching, you know, first of all, I was watching a lot of the Japanese super lightweights or lightweights. I think they refer to them as, basically they were cruiserweights, smaller but faster, more physically active, kind of dynamic wrestling as opposed to the 6'5", 280-pound big man, which is more of a slow, slumbering, power move kind of match. Whereas the smaller guys in New Japan, where I was doing a lot of business, I loved the pace of those matches. They were fast. The guys were flying all over the place. And I was first exposed to Eddie and Dean and Chris Benoit while they were working for New Japan. And I looked at them and I looked at, the Japanese that obviously I was doing business with. And I thought, man, I could create a division of these cruiserweights because it's different than everything else, right? Everybody's used to the big man, the giant, larger than life characters. And we had a lot of them. But we didn't have anybody that could go out there, week after week after week and have that really high flying kind of dynamic match. And once I made up my mind about the cruiserweights, then it was naturally, well, the only place better than Japan to find what I was looking for was Mexico, because there's so many of them. And then we had relationships, and Eddie obviously is the one that probably tagged everybody in first, Eddie Guerrero. So it was just through relationships that I had access early on to all that talent, and nobody else was really looking at it. Paul Heyman used some of the luchadors in ECW, but he didn't create a division for it. He didn't make it a thing, and he wasn't a national prime time. So I think WCW and Nitro really deserves a lot of credit for a lot of the lucha influence you see today. Of course, that was all spearheaded by Eddie Guerrero. It wasn't Eric Bischoff, and not necessarily Eddie Guerrero. Eddie did too, but Rey Mysterio changed the game for not only luchadors to get an opportunity in the U.S., which they clearly are doing, but also for 75% of the talent you see on TV wouldn't be getting the opportunities they're getting were it not for guys like Eddie and Chris and Dean and the cruiserweights proving that there's a big audience for that style of wrestling. And, Rey Mysterio is the king of it all, brother. We created the platform. I made a commitment to it. But Rey Mysterio, Conan too. Conan was a guy that he was the conduit. He brought all those luchadors over. He was a pain in the ass most of the time, but he still did it and is responsible for it. It wouldn't have gotten to where it was without Conan. So a lot of people involved.
You guys had an amazing roster of cruiserweights. Vince obviously tried to replicate that with the light heavyweight division. I mean, it's not possible that you could have had all of the best cruiserweights in the world. There had to be some out there, but when he tried, he failed horribly. It was so boring.
Because he didn't commit to it and he didn't really know why it worked. And Vince had a style, and that's one thing, I worked with him and for him and against him for the better part of 30 years in some combination thereof. And you get a feel for people when you're kind of competing against them head to head the way we did for so long. And Vince's style is very well defined. If you go and look at things that have the most Vince McMahon fingerprints on them, it's all the really big man stuff, including Hulk Hogan. Look at The Undertaker. Vince was a big man, larger than life. That was his influence, his style. Mine was faster, more visually dynamic. So even though Vince called them light heavyweights, the action that they presented in the ring was really not any different. Maybe a little bit, but not enough to make the audience go, oh, this is different than that. I want to watch this too. This is the only place I can get this. I'm going to stick here. And that's exactly what happened. The cruiserweight,
I didn't like some of those guys. Yeah, and it's not like I didn't like some of the light heavyweight guys. They had some good guys there, but it just didn't work.
Well, they didn't make a commitment to it. You have to, you guys have probably heard me if you listen to my podcast. I beat on this drum all the time because it's so applicable. But better than, less than, or different than. So what Vince did was basically try to be better than I was at what I was doing. But he wasn't different. It was less than. He wasn't better, and there was nothing different enough about it, so he kind of defaulted to less than. And he gave up on it because he wasn't committed to it, and he didn't know why it wasn't working.
Yeah, Vince's style of wrestling, like you said, is very distinct. It's the New York style. It's You do things a very specific way, and if you don't change that, you lose something. I feel.
Yeah, I mean, that's true for everybody, though. Verne Gagne was the same way. I mean, look, when you're a promoter, or in today's world, nobody's a promoter anymore. WWE is a television production company. It just happens to be producing professional wrestling,
which is wild, because that's what you always said WCW was back in the day.
Well, yeah, that's because that's what Ted Turner told me it was. So yeah. It wasn't like I discovered a cure for something. It was like, this is what we do. This is how you frame your business from the lens of a television production company. And what that really means is, where are you putting your emphasis? What's the number one priority? Is it television, or is it selling tickets? Because they're not always the same thing, right? Sometimes you have to prioritize one over the other. But anyway, next question. I'm sorry, I go off into so many weeds.
No, please. That's if you want to go off on a tangent, please do. That's what we do here.
Listen, I don't know tangents if you know what this is, but we're big Kevin Smith fans, so we're used to long-winded explanations. And
good, you got the right guy here. You're used to it, then.
So I mean, pro wrestling is kind of like AI. You never really know what you can believe nowadays. But we've always heard stuff that like Nash and Hogan would say. When you supposedly would say that you were going to put Vince out of business someday, they would tell you that's bullshit. It's never going to happen. Fact or fiction?
Did they tell me to my face bullshit that's never going to happen? No. Do I think they probably felt that way? Of course. Sure, they did. Do I think they said it to each other? Of course. But I don't remember anybody ever responding. First of all, I'm sure I said shit like that. I know I did. But I can never imagine, I can't recall an instance where I said something like that and somebody looked me in the eye and said, "Oh, I think that's bullshit." Because I would have remembered that moment. Didn't happen.
What was the ultimate plan for the NWO? Like, was it going to become its own thing? Was it going to become its own brand, show brand?
Well, it became its own brand. It became its own brand. And if you go back and look, and I can't really point you to the time frame necessarily, but I think it was right before Thunder. What are we talking? 97, I think, summer of 97. I was already positioning, and it wasn't like it was a master plan. Don't let me fool you, right? It wasn't like it was a master plan, but because of how far the NWO had come and how much we all saw it was, how much it was working, the plan kind of evolved and coincided with Ted Turner saying, "Okay, I want 2 hours on TBS. You got 2 hours on Nitro. I want 2 hours on TBS." That was actually one of the worst decisions for WCW in all of its history. But my thought was then, all right, I got this NWO thing. We'll keep building it up. I'll add to the roster so eventually I can have my own NWO brand. And I was going to give NWO Nitro, and I was going to give WCW Thunder, and basically run two separate brands, similar, I guess, to what we saw Vince do with Raw and SmackDown for the last however many years. So that ultimately was the plan for the NWO, even though it wasn't the original plan. Ultimately, it became the plan about halfway through. But the wheels started falling off, as I said, creatively, because there were so many other things happening internally that things started getting a little wobbly, and I was never able to really execute the dual brand strategy that we, at least for a while, were really working towards.
Is that kind of what led into that NWO bloat? Every guy on the roster had an NWO shirt on at one point, it seemed like. Well,
that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it sure felt that way.
It very much was an exaggeration.
Yeah,
but
it felt that way, and mostly it felt that way because none of it mattered. We didn't make it matter. In the beginning, it mattered. Look how much it mattered for DDP when he refused to take the colors. That's a very symbolic, tribal kind of, gangster, mobster kind of vibe, right? When you turn down a color, when you turn down your colors or somebody's patch or whatever it is in any organized kind of environment, it's symbolic. And every time we added someone in the beginning, it mattered. There was a story behind it. It was part of something. It led to something else. By the time we started just stacking the deck, none of it mattered.
Okay.
But we didn't. My point was we didn't do anything to make it matter. We were just adding bodies, right?
Yeah. When DX showed up with their tank that looked like a Jeep to Nitro shows, and they were coming down to your garage doors and knocking. Nash and Hall did an interview where they said that they were on the other side of the door the one night trying to get them to open up the door. I mean, listen, as somebody who challenged Vince to fight on a pay-per-view, would you have been pissed? Would there have been legal?
No, I would have been great. Here's the only way I would have been pissed is if I didn't have time to get cameras back there to shoot it. That would have been some of the most amazing TV in the world. And I've heard all the stories, and I'm not calling anybody out in any version of the stories they have. But that all took place literally while I was in the ring cutting a promo. And I had an IFB in my ear, so the director could talk to me, or I could hear the director. And the director was yelling at me, and I couldn't make it out because I'm out in the middle of the ring, and I'm doing the crowds. Blah, blah. So Annette Yoder, who was the production assistant, was down on the floor getting my attention and made sure I, put the IFB in my ear, and I heard it. But by the time I figured out what was going on, it was all over. Doug Dillinger shut the doors, locked it up. But if I would have had enough, if I could have heard, Eric, they want to come in. What should we do? Or they're trying to get in. What should we do? Be like, open the freaking doors. Make sure you've got cameras out there because I want it on TV, but open the doors. It would have been fun because nothing physical would have happened. There would have been no. It would have.
They're all friends. They're all friends. All those guys are friends. So you're not going to go in there and kick somebody's ass.
If we would have
opened the door, they stiff each other.
If we would have opened the door, they wouldn't have known what to do.
Right.
Yeah, they would. Everybody would have just kind of stood there and stared at each other for about 10 minutes. And
I know you have a background in martial arts. What were you, a black belt in, was it karate?
Yeah.
Okay. I know you have a boxing background and a Greco-Roman wrestling background. Let's say scenario Vince shows up. How do you think they actually would have went? I mean, he's not a real fighter. He's not. I mean, he's gassed to the gills at the time, but
Oh, you mean when I challenged him?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I wasn't worried about it, to be honest with you. I was still reasonably capable at that time for short bursts. but
I mean, even if you get your ass kicked, it's good television.
Well, that's kind of that's really how I felt about it. I mean, I honestly was fairly confident. But even that aside, it's like, oh, what if I'm wrong? Well, then I get my ass kicked on a pay-per-view. It's my pay-per-view. It's going to be a record. So it's like, if I win, I win. If I lose, I still win. Hell, I'll do that.
So go ahead.
Back when WCW sold to WWE, we started kind of getting a bigger peek behind the curtain as fans. Turns out, according to the stories at least, that some of the bigger stars in WCW weren't actually contracted to WCW as an entity. They were contracted to Time Warner. Why were some guys contracted differently?
I don't necessarily. That's not true. That's not true. Now there may, Warner.
Like you said, the internet is full of lies and speculation. So we're kind of just trying to get the straight shit.
The deal was those contracts weren't transferable.
Okay.
So they were under contract to Turner, but Turner couldn't assign those. It's a legal definition or term. They couldn't assign those contracts as part of a sale to a third party. So if Turner dissolved or if WCW dissolved, Turner as a company didn't have the option to sell those contracts or otherwise transfer those contracts to whoever the new owners would be. That was the issue. So for WWE, they bought the intellectual property, trademarks, copyrights, videos, all that shit. But they would have had to cut new deals for anybody that they wanted. Now they could probably look at, and I don't recall exactly the legal structures of these deals. I wasn't involved in it at any point. But typically, if the contracts aren't assignable, you sit down and you identify the guys you want to keep, and you sit down with them. And if you can afford their current deals, great. If you can't, you renegotiate it. If you can't renegotiate it, you cut them loose.
So everybody credits the you and the NWO with changing the business and kind of ushering in two things: a more taboo, blurred line stories, between reality and fiction, and supposedly big money guaranteed contracts. But the NWO, Scott Hall, guys like that, they created these cool heels that everybody wanted to be, and like we stopped hating them and started, liking the bad guys more. I personally have always thought it's created a little bit of a problem on the indie scene. Not complaining, not blaming you. That's not where I'm going. But have you ever noticed this over the years where like there's a lack of real heels nowadays that the business seems to be like kind of crying out for, because a lot of guys want to be the cool heel that still get cheered?
Yeah, and that's, yes, I have noticed that over the decades, and I've noticed it. The same is true in the movie business. It's not, it doesn't manifest in the same way. It doesn't play out in the same way to the consumer necessarily, unless you're really looking for it. But, Terminator, the first time, a really kind of a bad dude, but for the right reasons, right? That character in videos and movies and video games started to be, and in wrestling, obviously. I don't know where it all started, but I guess it's called anti-hero. You do some dastardly shit, but you do it for the right reasons. That's kind of the aspirational character that the red, white, and blue, mom, apple pie, go America. That's a different kind of, John Wayne. Wayne couldn't get over in the 90s, right?
No.
Because he represented that just pure apple pie, good guy, when the audience was looking for a bad guy with a good excuse.
Which was where Clint Eastwood kind of came in.
Yeah, and kind of why Hogan lost a little bit of steam in the 90s.
That's exactly why. It's exactly why he turned heel, because he recognized that. And the other thing in wrestling is, here's kind of what I see, and I've watched it from both sides. I mean, I've been a part of it as well as observing it and then having people work for me and with me. Is most people, especially in the indie scene, because they're just learning as they're going. They're learning on the job, literally. And some of them with, some training and guidance, but a lot of them with such bad training and no guidance. But they're out there and they're doing it and they're trying to figure it out. But along the way, the ones who learn how to enjoy being heels, and I don't mean cool heels, but I mean, if you really enjoy heat and you learn, you recognize the difference between a reaction where people are booing and heat where people are feeling. One's acting, one's feeling. If you can get to the point where you can create the feeling of heat within an audience, it's addictive as anything else, but most people don't like it because it goes against everything you're taught. You're taught to, get along with people so everybody likes you. When you're in school, you want everybody to pick you to be on their team or sit next to you on the bus or hang out with you at lunch or whatever, right? You want to be part of the group. Whereas if you really want to be a heel, I mean a heel that makes lots of money and can work forever, is learn how to love being a heel. Most people don't. Most talent really, they'll tell you they do, but deep down inside, nobody wants to get booed. It goes against your grain.
I complain to guys all the time who are on the verge of real heat, on the verge of getting there, why are you going out and signing autographs and taking pictures and sitting at your gimmick stand?
Because they want to be liked.
Stop doing this shit, please. And I beg them, and they're just killing it for themselves, and they don't.
Well, they don't get it.
They
absolutely. That's where the no guidance comes in. If you don't start having a fundamental understanding and respect for the art form, which is nothing more than a cool way of saying, if you don't understand how it is this shit works and why people are willing to part with their cash to come watch you do stuff, it's because you got to make them feel something. And if you're just going out there dancing, they're not going to feel anything, and they're not going to come back. So
they know what's fake and what's real. If you're trying, if it's not real, they're going to know. They're not going to respond to it. Well, we have our end of the podcast questionnaire that we do. It was stolen from Mr. Bernard Pivo and James Lipton. Quick little answers, just whatever you feel. Kipper's going to do
10 about 10 quick questions for you.
There's no such thing as a quick answer with me. You can ask the questions as quick as you want. The answers are going to be what the answers are.
What is your favorite word?
Hope.
What is your least favorite word?
No.
What sound or noise do you love?
Ooh. Birds. Geese.
What sound or noise?
Ducks and geese. It's like my thing. I go into a hypnotic state.
Nice. What sound or noise do you hate?
Sirens.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would have made a hell of a trial lawyer.
What profession other than your own would you not like to attempt?
Medicine.
Creatively, what turns you on?
Challenges.
And in the same vein, what turns you off?
Oh, you had to ask me that question today. Lack of communication, because that's really the cause of most everything.
And the last two questions are the most popular questions, especially with us. What is your favorite curse word?
That's a really tough one, because I'm really trying hard to stop, because I have a horrible mouth, and I'm really, really trying. I mean, I got a lot of shit to fix. There I go again. I got a lot of stuff to work on and fix, but that's kind of a big one, and I haven't really put much effort into it. And I know I need to, but I drop F-bombs way too often.
Okay. And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Just welcome would be just fine. Just good.